All right, are we ready to start, everybody? All right, let me call the meeting to order, please.
Directors Weed,
Here.
Gunther,
Here.
Koller,
Here.
Sethy,
Here.
and Huang.
Here. Director Koller, would you lead us in a salute to the flag, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Next item is public comments on matters on this notice of special meeting. Mr. Mr. Ramos, any comments for us tonight? Please identify yourself. Please identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
My name is Reggie Lemos, and I live in Newark. First of all, I'm going to hold my thanks for the recension of the surcharge for what happened on
Could you speak into the microphone, please? Thank you. I can't even hear you from here.
Anyway, most reports on conferences are not of interest to us, the public, and especially me. The public, it's not for the public, and it's not informative to the public. Just tell us what you're going to charge us and how much your expenditures are. And see what else. Oh, and if you're concerned about the debt that ACWD is getting into, I'm not concerned because our nation is in debt to over $4 trillion, and the state is in debt for I don't know how many billions of dollars. And you know, when you get down to this company in the millions, you know, you'll get over it. So I also like to just thank you for what you guys are doing. I know your interest is in the public, and a lot of times when I talk to some people, and I know you're going to say, what? Some of them don't even know where the water's coming from. They don't. I was talking to one gentleman this morning, and he says, really? He says, since when are we buying water from Hetchetchee? Anyway, those are some of the things that I know you put up with, and so I thank you for your job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, let's move on to the consent calendar, please. Do I have any members of the board that wish to add items to the consent calendar?
Add item 5.1 for the consent calendar tonight.
I'll second the motion.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Koller,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. Do I have any motions to adopt the consent calendar?
I'll move consent calendar is modified.
I'll second.
So Director Gunther moved and Director Sethy second the motion. That's actually a very good point. My apologies. Mr. Ramos, would you like to comment on any of the consent calendar items? Thank you. With that, we have a motion and second, please.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Koller,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. With that, let's move on to item 5.2, please.
Yes, item 5.2 will be presented initially by Manager of Finance, Shelley Brigette.
Thank you, Bob. Today we're going to have a brief presentation by Herman Chen on the discussions we had at our budget workshop. And also, I think that you each have a copy of the presentation where you're sitting. And in addition, you have a copy of the budget booklet, I think. Right, Herman?
Yes.
Okay.
Everyone should have a budget book and a budget presentation inside the book.
So with that, Herman, I'll hand it over to you.
Good evening, President Huang, members of the board. As Shelley mentioned, I will be providing a brief overview of our mid-cycle budget amendment.
Actually, Herman, can I ask you to be a little bit closer to the mic? It's actually kind of hard to hear, and since we're recording this meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
As Shelley mentioned, I will be going over doing a brief overview of the mid-cycle budget amendments to the fiscal year 16-17 budget as well as the 25-year CIP. The proposed revisions were, like Shelley mentioned, reviewed at the May 26th budget workshop, and they reflect the board guidance from that workshop. I'm going to first start off with the agenda. We're going to briefly go over the financial workshop's topics and timeline, as well as the two-year budget cycle, which is more for the public. And then we're going to follow up with a budget summary, expense review, projected ending reserves and financial ratios, the CIP, and then the staff's recommendation.
Are you advancing that, or is he?
Oh, whoops. So through December through April, we had conducted 4 financial workshops to go over various rate design options. On May 26th, we had a budget workshop to go over proposed amendments to the budget. Today's special board meeting is to adopt those amendments. The district has a 2-year budget cycle. What we do is at the end of the first year, we adopt revisions to reflect financial activity for the second year. And that's what we're doing today. The orange circle represents our budget workshop, and in the dark blue is what we're doing today, the adoption of the mid-cycle budget amendments. This next slide is our district financial planning process. This is a slide that we used in prior workshops. It's to show how our various financial planning documents flowed through our financial planning model and eventually help us develop our rate proposal. Of to note is the 2 green boxes, which represents an important part of our financial planning process, which is to include public input. This next slide is our budget summary. The first column is our 16-17 adopted budget, and this next column is our proposed amended budget. What I would like to note is the second to last line, the net of revenues and expenses. You can see we went from a plus 2 million net of revenue expenses to a minus 13 million. So it's a $15 million swing. The next slide provides some detail about that. As you can see, the 15 million swing, the bulk of it is in the first line. Total revenues went down $9 million. And the bulk of that is water revenue. There are a couple of factors for the water revenue. One was that the demand projections are coming in lower than what we originally budgeted a year ago. The next was also the deferral of a rate adjustment as we evaluate rate design options. That's what those financial workshops were for. The third is the recent board action to rescind the drought surcharges. So that water revenue went down about 17 million. We're only showing a $9 million decrease here because we have FCC charges and customer job revenue that offset it partially, as well as a anticipated $4 million land sale of the Deer Road property. One thing I would like to know about the revenue is that this is using the demand projections from the May workshop, which were very conservative. Recent demand projections show a significant uptick, so this is a conservative budget. On the expense side, if you look, you can see that source of supply went up 2.7 million. That represents both state water project costs as well as SFPUC costs, which went up 1.3 million and 2 million respectively. Source of supply also includes 660,000 for the Contra Costa Water District pilot project that we had budgeted this current fiscal year, but we are carrying forward to the following. Source of supply is offset partially because we are using less semi-tropic this year or next fiscal year. So that went down 1.4 million. Expense projects, you can see it went up 1.4 million. That reflects recent board guidance to include 450,000 in studies for alternative water supplies, as well as planned upgrades for both Kayenta and JDE. For CIP, that represents board guidance to use the level 1 CIP scenario, which consists of a number of things. Updated project costs, adjusted recurring costs, scheduled revisions to the Alameda Creek Fish Passage projects for permitting in CEQA, deferred decommissioning of facilities, and delaying the Avalon tank site slope stability project. The level 1 CIP, I want to note, will reduce the fiscal impact of the general fund by 17 million over 5 fiscal years. The next slide is the same data, but sliced differently. The previous one was based off of cost center. This one's by cost element. And you can see that labor went down slightly, purchase water went up, like I said about State Water Project and SFUC, and employee benefits went down. This, I want to note, is that this budget also reflects 2 recent board actions for job reclassifications. One was the health and safety supervisor being reclassed to the emergency response security officer, and the other one was an accounting supervisor being reclassed to financial analyst. So a $15 million swing is a pretty big hit, but what I want to show is our reserves and financial ratios. You can see that our projected ending reserves is 96 million, but at 96 million, we still maintain our 10 million emergency rate stabilization reserve, as well as have 7 million above our policy target for the O&M and capital reserve. In addition, we also will have a 229% debt service coverage ratio, 2.29. The next 2 slides are on the CIP, and these are slides that Tony Lyons had presented at the May workshop. As you can see, customer job is higher, and it's also reflecting the revenue with higher customer job revenue. And you can see that a lot of these major projects are for reliability. As you can see in this pie chart, which was also presented at the budget workshop, roughly half of our CIP for next fiscal year is for either system, production, or seismic reliability. And customer jobs represents a big chunk as well, which is, like I said, represents higher development activity. The last slide is our staff recommendation, which is just to adopt a resolution amending the budget for fiscal year 16-17 and the 25-year CIP. That concludes my presentation. Staff is available to answer questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
I don't have any.
I'm good. Yes, several, if
Do
I
we?
might. Under revenues, we have both restricted and unrestricted revenues, correct? Are they combined under the revenue
Yes.
package?
All our is total revenues.
These are total revenues, but they include both restricted revenues and unrestricted revenues.
Right.
Is the land sale a restricted revenue or an unrestricted revenue?
I consider it unrestricted,
Yeah,
That's unrestricted.
right.
not tied for a specific purpose.
The $82 million in anticipated revenues now includes does that include a anticipated 25% rate increase
For just the 3 months
for 3 months?
of the end of the fiscal year 16-17.
And does it also, how much additional consumption does it also assume?
It reflects the demand from the budget workshop, which was 28 point something MGD. I don't have the.
So I think the consumption value is very conservative.
Right, we did not adjust the consumption from our conservative assumptions from the board workshop.
So that was a 5% increase in the current year as compared to last year, or the coming year, which starts tomorrow, as opposed to the prior year.
It was yes, it was approximately 5% over what we believe this current fiscal year is going to end.
Okay, so what strikes me is that we've dropped the drought surge. So to achieve the 82.5, without those additional changes, the increased consumption and a rate increase of 25%, we would be about $74 million just carrying through from last year.
Can I ask staff for clarification? Where
Yes,
does
water
the $75 million
revenue
comes from?
was supposed to be right around 74 million, right? In our figures. I do have the workshop information, I just need to dig through it.
Oh, just helpful. So we're assuming we're going to have, based on, and it looks like the numbers are coming in greater. So I'm going from 74 to 82 million. Base, we're going to be adding another $8 million in revenue this year that we did not have in place last year. We've dropped the drought surcharge, we've dropped some other things. And we're coming fairly close to where we were last year. We ended last year's revenue somewhere in the area of $80 million.
Give or take, yes.
The challenge I have overall in our budget is that we don't look at our legacy costs, which continue to grow, and our borrowing costs, and our failure to cover depreciation. Is it correct to assume that this budget will not cover any of the depreciation?
Well, I think we mentioned that this at F&O. Our CIP is higher than our depreciation currently, which is $12 million.
So will any of that $12 million be covered in this budget?
As far as we're projecting for our income statement this next year, we'll probably be, based on the assumptions we had during the workshop in May, that we will not be covering our depreciation, no.
None of the $12 million will be covered. And there was also discussion that the $12 million really understates our requirements to meet our needs for continuing operation and maintenance of the facilities. And let's pick a figure of 50% more. So maybe $18 million not covered under this budget.
Well, except for we do have a rate increase plan for the end of the year, which will then cause the next year to have a higher coverage of both those elements that you're talking about.
Okay. Well, when I throw in depreciation and the needed for additional depreciation, and I look at what it would take if we started to cover and recover our increased liabilities, I come up with a number that where our shortfall is going to be about $36 million that we're going to need next year over the $74 million, about $110 million in revenue to really get us on track.
And Director Weed, we've done that. We've projected all that with our financial planning model, and we do know that. That's why we were talking about the rate increases that we've been looking at on paper, although our demand is recovering right now, so we don't anticipate that rate increases will be as high as we are expecting. However, we do have rate meetings coming up towards the end of this year, and it will be up to the board to decide how much of depreciation we cover, how much of our unfunded liabilities we will cover. There's many different levels of coverage that we could do, and we can do it gradually or we can do it all at once. So, but just saying, this is a budget that's just a static moment in time, and we will be coming back to the board in the next several months to start talking about what is the type of coverage do you want to cover our expenses and our unfunded liabilities and our capital needs into the future.
Well, my point being, it is a budget, but it's part of a 10 years of operating losses, which I would argue has built up anywhere from, depending on what discount rates you use, anywhere from $200 to $250 million in liabilities for this district that we have created over the last 10 years by underfunding our operations.
Well, one
And that-
board member's opinion, John,
That's not an opinion, those are
So,
facts.
so,
it's
hold
not
on
fair.
just a sec. Director Weed, I really respect your comments. You brought up some really good points. And those are the issues you identify as something that we have to follow up, and we will have an extensive discussion on those issues when we talk about the potential for a rate increase. This particular budget in front of you is just for the next few months. I think we all recognize that we will need a rate increase in order to sustain our operations. So with that, I would ask you to focus more on this
Okay,
budget.
First of all, this is a budget for the next year, and it assumes a 25% rate increase to be adopted by this board following the election in November. So it's.
That was just a placeholder. That was not something that we thought that at this point we could bring to the board and say, is that something that you would adopt? Because right now, things are changing very rapidly as far as our demand picture. And again, we will be coming to the board with many different scenarios of how much you can cover within a year or within 5 years to get us back up to covering our unfunded liabilities or anything, or any other priority that we have as far as this district and board's direction.
As we continue to kick this can down the road, and the can is becoming, as Mr. Koller has pointed out, a barrel, as it keeps getting bigger and bigger, we would need, on my mind, $36 million, not $8 million more next year. We're still going to be short almost $30 million, even with the 25% rate increase. And maybe we'll cover it up with some additional consumption. But we are so woefully underfunded as a district that it is a lack of fiscal responsibility on the part of this board that's been
Well-
developed over a period of 10 years.
Thank you,
That's my-
Director Weed, for
President
your...
Huang, may I make a comment, please?
Yes, Director Sethy.
I'll make it short, but I do want to go on record as objecting seriously to the comments of Director Weed right now. And we have had a continuing debate about this on the Finance Committee. But there is a absolute difference between corporate finance and public finance, and the way it's taught in any finance course that you go through. And to assert that we have an operating loss for 10 years or more, I find very objectionable. That is absolutely not true.
It's an absolute fact.
No, it's not.
It's on our
Okay,
documents.
so-
Look at our
It's
CalPERS.
not a
They
fact.
So,
show
hold on
operating
just a sec.
I
every
would
year
like
for the last
to-
10 years.
It's Director
I would
Sethy
like
has the
to
floor.
express my opinion here. I have always felt it would be desirable if we covered our depreciation and amortization costs, but it is not necessary in running a public or government entity when we have substantial non-water revenues that come into the district, like property taxes and developer fees and other things. And we have to be responsible to the public in terms of balancing our budget with those non-water revenues that come in as well. We have gone through 2 periods in the last 8 years right now. 1, a very serious recession that drew down demand, and 2, we went through a very serious 4-year drought. Those affected revenues. What we discussed in the last workshop, a public workshop, what we as a board adopted was a very conservative budget moving forward. And I had asked 9 months ago for a study going back 100 years on what happens after we come out of droughts, and what was presented was that there is a spike in demand. We are going through that right now. We were as low as about, I think, 28 million gallons a day in our distribution system, and we are now approaching 45 million gallons a day. So I recognize that we are losing the drought surcharge revenue. I voted in favor of rescinding the drought surcharge. But if we are able to at least meet an $80 million or $82 million of revenue coming in, close to where we were in the last 2 years, and may I remind the board that we're completing our fiscal year today, and what we learned in the finance meeting last week is that we will be probably slightly better in reporting our CAFR for this year than we were the previous year. And the forecast for the coming year, based on water demand and non-water revenues, show or indicates that we will have an even better year moving forward. And so there's a good chance that we may be able to cover some of our depreciation and amortization, but it's not a necessity right now. Lastly, I have asked our finance department in future meetings, for the help of the board, to indicate in our forecast. Right now, we show a red line in our charts as to what is the baseline that we need to have in terms of covering our cash requirements and our debt ratio for the district. In support of Director Weed, I have asked that we have a secondary graph that shows us what will help us to meet and cover our depreciation and amortization, and anything over and above that, which is what I'm most interested in, is what we can use to pay down unfunded liabilities. So I'm supporting Director Weed in that sense, that we do need that information, and we need to start planning for the future in that regard. But just to close, I seriously object in a public meeting when we have a AAA credit rating to assert that we have continuing operating losses.
Just a quick point, factual. The document we have in front of us shows a net operating loss for this projected for this year in this budget of $13,036,200.
Correct.
And I suggest that that may be about half of the actual losses that we're going to incur based on our increased liabilities that are not being funded.
Thank you, Director Weed, for your comments. With that, do I have any comments from members of the public? Questions? With that, okay, do I have a motion?
I'll move I guess, acceptance of the
Staff recommendation.
staff recommendation.
I'll second the motion.
So Director Gunther moved, Director Koller second.
Directors Weed,
No.
Gunther,
Aye.
Koller,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. With that, let's move on to the next item, item 5.3.
Thank you, President Huang. The Board of Directors is the legislative body that governs the ACWD, the district, and it's accountable to the people of the district. The district has adopted rules of the board to govern its proceedings. On April 25th, in this year, 2016, the board reviewed the existing rules, evaluated potential revisions to the rules to guide board members in their conduct and actions, and provided input to staff and legal counsel. Since then, staff and legal counsel have strived to incorporate the board's input into a new document, which would become a potential revised rules of the board. So I have a brief presentation to go over these issues. And again, the board rules are intended to govern the proceedings of the district. So it has numerous objectives that include be transparent and accountable to the people of the district, ensure legal compliance, implement governance clarifications and improvements, clarify board member interactions with key staff and the public, and these were the goals for this potential revision of the document, and outline the appropriate code of conduct for individual board members, and then most significantly create a go-to document a reference document that would be useful to the board, to staff, legal counsel, and the public for key ACWD board-related policies and practices. The current board rules were adopted in 2000 by resolution, and they've been amended 6 times since then, most recently in December 2014. And the current board rules are a relatively simple document, mostly related to just the roles and responsibilities of the directors, the committees, and the actual process of conducting board meetings. The proposed rules that the board reviewed, and you should have 2 handouts. One was black and white, and another one is red line. The black and white document is the document that was created after the board workshop. And what staff heard was that what the board would like is incorporate the policies, address board interactions with staff, public, and the media, clarify certain procedural elements, and guide board members in their understanding, that's existing as well as future board members, of roles and expectations. Again, I will emphasize that the whole purpose of revising the board rules is not to change the concept that the board is the policy making entity of the district. There's no change in that. So more specifically, the black and white document incorporates revisions that we made since staff and legal counsel made since the April 25th workshop. And then the red line document is a more recent version of that. I did provide the black and white document to the directors in advance of this meeting. The red one has some additional minor revisions. It updated the table of contents. It has some non-material revisions to make the document more consistent within the document. And then there were certain corrections made to section 16 in the document, which I'll be happy to review. But more importantly, I just kind of want to briefly go over where the major revisions occurred since the workshop and point your attention to certain areas in the document. As was requested by the board during the workshop, staff and legal counsel have strived to incorporate the appropriate government and water code citations. We have also made some revisions in section numbering and titles. We clarified that the 3 individuals that report to the board are the general manager, the auditor, and general counsel. We clarified the roles and responsibilities of general counsel, introduced a new concept of special counsel, and then there was a request to clarify the roles of the board secretary as required by code, and better explain the difference between the board secretary and the district secretary. So the way we dealt with that is to say that the district uses a district secretary to fulfill the required roles of board secretary, and currently the district secretary is a direct report to the general manager. Let's see, we clarified responsibilities related to the use of district-owned and private vehicles. We clarified guidelines for board member communications with district staff. We had an extended discussion about that issue at the board workshop. And we reworked the document to guide communications with the public, other agencies, the media, and other organizations as a representative, or as an individual board member, or even as a member of the public. So hopefully that's responsive to the input that you provided back in April. In Section 6, we revised that to make the electric communications guidelines consistent to the extent that it's appropriate with the same guidelines that staff adheres to. We clarified, again, board member staff communications, the interrelationship with the directors and staff, in hopefully consistent with the direction that the board provided in April. In Section 14, we've taken a stab at limiting board member traveling together in an attempt to ensure the continuing governance of the district. And basically what it says is that generally two directors should not, more than two directors should travel together in a car or in a plane unless the travel is being provided by some other entity. And that was a concern that was raised during the workshop. We added a new section that hopefully has everything that the board or members of the public would want to know regarding board member compensation and expense reimbursement. And then lastly, the plan is that we would put this document in a 3-ring binder, and then we would incorporate all the reference board policies in that binder as well to try to create a comprehensive document. So in a nutshell, that's an overview of what we've been doing since April. You've had the document to review, and staff is most certainly interested in any feedback that the board has for us.
Director Sethy?
I reviewed all of the changes from our workshop, and I have no additional changes to recommend. I support the document revised as is right now.
Director Koller?
Yes, I have a few recommendations. Page 5, the third bullet.
Are you in the black and white document?
I'm in the black and white.
Okay.
Yes. New board members should make arrangements with the board secretary to complete all required training as outlined in section what? Is there a specific section that we're referring to?
Yes. The most recent version of the document refers to section 17.
Section 17, okay. All right. And then moving down on the same page, a member cannot attend. He or she should promptly notify the board president and other committee members for committee meetings and the board secretary as soon as possible. I kind of find that a little cumbersome. In the past, we've been very careful to notify the board secretary, and the board secretary passes on the changes that have occurred. That's been our practice. I'm a little concerned of putting the burden on the individual board member to notify the board president. If the board president's out of state and not available through email, it could be difficult. Okay. Going to page 8.
So Director Koller?
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So typically we have, just as to aid the board's deliberations, typically we do have somebody acting in the role of board secretary, even if Gina is not available. We also have somebody acting in the role of general manager, if the general manager is not available. So should the board feel that that this section should be revised, one potential way to do that would be to have the person, the board member that cannot attend, a board or committee member, notify those two individuals, and there will be coverage.
Right, that was my question for you, is would that be satisfactory, just replace board president with general manager?
Well, board secretary or general manager. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think what might be safe is to cover both bases, just ask the director to notify the general manager and the board secretary.
Okay,
Right, because board secretary is currently already in there.
Right, so we would
So-
revise it to reflect.
Right, so just replace board president with general manager, then that should accomplish the goal.
yes. I just need a little clarification on 2.5.2.6 on page 8. It's, can we just have a general discussion on this?
So, just to make sure we're all reviewing the same section, 2.5.2.6 starts off saying, "Information and advice provided to board members during a closed session is generally confidential," and continues. Everybody's
Yes.
looking at that section? Okay.
So what's the question?
Well, it says a board member may inadvertently waive the attorney-client privilege by discussing closed session matters with third parties. Can you clarify that? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, so the general rule, so this blends two different concepts in it. One is something that's discussed in closed session. There's a statute in the Brown Act that says whatever's discussed in closed session shall remain in the closed session unless authorized by the board to be disclosed outside. So that's the Brown Act provision. Also tied to that is some of the things in closed session. So and there's closed sessions that may deal with real property negotiations, things that are not protected by the attorney-client privilege necessarily. But some of the closed session items may be protected by the attorney-client privilege when we talk about litigation and things like that. And there's other provisions in the evidence code that protects confidential communications between the attorney and the client. So that would be your general counsel or special counsel and the board. But if there's a voluntarily disclosure of that communication to a third party, somebody other than the lawyers or the client, then you waive that attorney-client privilege. So this is to remind the board of that
Okay.
potential to waive and to caution against it.
So inadvertently, it's telling us that there's a liability here if you waive that option.
Not a liability, but you lose the privilege.
The privilege, okay, yes.
So you would lose the attorney-client privilege for that particular communication that is disclosed to a third party.
Wow. Well, I appreciate that being in print. Thank you. I'm going to move to page 14 in the black and white. On the very bottom, it says, "May not use any district resources." Bob, can you explain, what are we talking outside of vehicles and?
Okay, so the section 5.9 refers to corresponding as an individual board member unrelated to district business. So the idea here is you're an individual, but you're corresponding on something. It's very possible that your personal views on a public matter may complicate things because it could be misinterpreted as an ACWD policy or decision. So the last item, 5.9.2, if you're corresponding as an individual unrelated to district business or campaigning, the board member may not use district letterhead, the district logo, or any functional electronic equivalent thereof, and you also may not use any district resources because it is not district business.
And resources mean, could actually be personnel, district personnel to accomplish a task.
Definitely.
Okay. On the same page, I just want to make a comment that I support. Actually, it's a new position on us. 5.8.2, board members representing the board should request the general manager to review and provide input on written communications to any entity outside of the district. And I find that a positive. That's a good policy to ensure that we stay on course with our messaging and our or information that's going out to the public, that it's in fact being supported by staff. So it's a good thing. Thank you very much. That's all the comments I want to make.
Director Gunther?
No, I'm just happy to see that we're doing it. You know, the times are changing, continue to change, and I think are going to change faster in the future. So periodic review of these are necessary, and we may have to shift to a more than 10-year mark. It's nothing to do with the present board, it has everything to do with where we'll be in the future and the changing rules. You know, one only has to look at the internet and see what has changed in the last 5 years or less as to where we are today. So thanks, a lot of work on this, thank you.
Director Lee?
First is an editorial comment for a document that is board rules and code of conduct. The issues relating to traits of effective board members, and there was another section in here, what does a good board do, really probably belong in a companion document and not under a board rule or code of conduct. I don't have any problem with the text. That certainly belong in this, or in this, the context of a.
So let's take it one item at a time, since they're editing it as we go. So would your proposal?
2.3.6.
So would
And
you?
there was another one
Right,
related
it's in the
to-
back about good behavior, when is good trait, when is good behavior, or something along that line.
You should be cheerful, trustworthy.
So I guess what I'm asking is, would your proposal be moving these two sections to an appendix in the back?
Either an appendix or a separate document entirely, just a separate note that the board could adopt as good behavior.
Well, certainly, we can do whatever is the board's pleasure. The idea was to try to make a comprehensive document.
Yeah.
It is called Board Rules and Code of Conduct, and some of these items kind of are more along the Code of Conduct.
And maybe that is the question, defining what is a rule and what is a code of conduct, has a separate entity, say, a separate potential legal status. And if we were to redraft this, I would possibly try to divide them between what is the board rules and what is a board code of conduct, either separate chapters or something of that nature.
So does the rest, how does the rest of the board feel? We're going to edit
Well,
this as we go.
Let me offer
Okay.
a slightly different tact on this. You know, in attending some of the California Special Districts Association seminars that I've been to, especially where they're talking about new board members or good board practices, I've learned so much in these seminars. The traits of an effective board member is inherently part of your code of conduct as a board member. And so when I was reviewing this, I thought that this was a really useful guideline for and a reminder of what it takes to perform well as a team, and what proper conduct is, not only within the board, but with the public as well.
Okay. Any other directors has comments on this?
I tend to actually agree, I more agree with Director Weed that I like the concept that's in there, but I also agree that, you know, the code of conduct, and I don't know about be positive in the face of the district, or, well, I mean, be a positive, be inquisitive. Really, it's a trait, but is it really a code of conduct? Is it really a board rule? A third section might be useful, or put it towards the end in its own kind of section, where these are things that are kind of guidelines, or more guidelines than actual, this is a rule, you know, you got to follow the sexual harassment practices. You have to follow these, you have to follow the conflict of interest practices, you know, traveling together or two. Those are rules. That being positive, I like the fact they're in there, but maybe shift them into sort of towards the end to say, this is something that we'd like to see as a trait or traits. I don't know, for
Okay.
team.
I can see that. Director Wee?
Section 11.1 in particular, as well as the one on the board traits, might belong best in a separate chapter that says code of conduct. And whether we do adopt them as separate entities or to combine, it really doesn't matter. But we should have some effort so that someone reading this says, well, you violated this board rule, and it was really a code of conduct issue. It wasn't a rule.
Okay, so we are trying to make a distinction between rule and the code of conduct. That's what I'm hearing. So what I would suggest, and let me know if you object to it, is that we have a different attachment or appendices that's specifically titled Code of Conduct. So we'll have this document as is, without those two sections, called Board Rules. And then there will be a compendium that's called Code of Conduct. So it will be two documents. You could put them together side by side, but at least there's a very clear division. Is that okay, Director Sethy?
Is there a preference as to whether there's a separate section or a completely different document?
Well, I know all I'm going to ask for is there's a clear separation. That's what I'm hearing. So if you could manage to keep it in the same document, still make it really clearly that one portion is the rule, the other portion is code of conduct, I think that would satisfy Director Wee. How about Director Sethy?
I could go along with it, but I would like some input from our legal counsel. You work with a lot of public agencies, and you work with attorneys that work with many more public agencies. What, in your experience, has been the practice?
So that's a great question. This is your document. So there is no legal requirement for what is included in this other than a statute that says you must have rules of the board, rules of procedure. The shape that takes and the content of that among our different clients varies, and what we've seen varies as well. What you had before this was really, truly rules of the board. It governed your board meetings, essentially, and your committee meetings. This is a much more comprehensive document, and we actually pulled this from models that your general manager had and some models that I provided from our different public agency clients, some of which had documents like this that were 50 pages as well. So this is really your document, and we're looking for guidance from you. I will say, though, that just listening to this discussion, the rules of the board and kind of some of the code of conduct are blended. I think you've pointed out some sections where it's easy to say, yeah, that's a code of conduct. It might be a more challenging task if we really wanted to have two separate documents to truly separate out what are rules of the board versus what are code of conduct, and it may require some splitting of some sections that are in here already.
Mm-hmm. Would a preamble work where you define, where you made a clear statement that this combines both rules of conduct and the rules have this influence and the code of conduct is advisory or something? Because there are certain, when you break a rule of the board, it strikes me there's a potentially different sanctions.
So if we just want to talk about the pure legal aspects of this, we've incorporated many provisions of the Brown Act. You know, the conflict of interest codes are incorporated into here. If you violate those in here, you violate the law. There are some things that are kind of rules of the board but aren't in the statute, just like in the code of conduct as well. By violating those, you'd be violating, like, you know, whether you want to call them a guideline, you're not violating the law. You would be, you know, you would need to waive your code of conduct. Traveling together, for example, is a good example of that. Is that a rule or is that a code of conduct? It's not a legal requirement that you don't travel together. But if you want to adopt a policy that says we're not going to do it because we want, you know, if something tragic happens, we don't want the full board in that, that's perfectly acceptable. You can waive that as well. So I guess where I'm going with this is you got to follow the law. Some of the laws are incorporated into this. Some of the things go beyond the law, and you're certainly permitted as a board to build them into your document.
Thank you.
And I would Well, we can work that. And then I would suggest the deletion of 14.1 in its entirety, which is the board restrictions on travel. I have not seen it to be a practical point. The suggestion is we needed to do it for continuity of governance, but then why, there may be other issues, concerns of the impression that we are having some type of a violation of the Brown Act. If that's the case, then that probably should be in the board rule. But as drafted, I would suggest it be deleted. And then on that same subject, item 2, traveling not under the direct control of the district or individual board members, I'm confused as to what the heck that
Excuse me,
means.
could you explain what, item 2, what?
So in in section 14.1,
Yes.
to be specific, it includes restrictions on board members traveling together, and there's 2 exceptions. And one of the exceptions is traveling as part of a larger group tour or other similar activity. So the intent there was if the board members are taking a tour of the Calaveras Reservoir and there's a bus, you can all get in the bus. The second exception is traveling not under the direct control of the district or individual board members. So for whatever reason, there's travel arrangements being made, and you're passive in that. It's being made by others. So that was just a little broader to try to prevent really inconvenient restrictions. So if you're making your own travel arrangements, or the district is making them for you, then as written, this would not allow 3 directors to travel together in an automobile or a plane. I should mention that there is this section, a section very similar to this in the existing board rules that was added by this board a few years ago, and it only included the restriction on traveling by aircraft. And it was pointed out that statistically, if you're worried about danger or accidents, you're much safer traveling by aircraft than you would be by automobile. So that's why staff basically did it this way. But again, this is the board's pleasure.
My preference would be to delete the entirety. I wasn't all enamored with the original concept.
So I will fess up. I was the instigator on this provision many, many years ago. As the story goes, we were at San Jose Airport on the same flight down to Aqua Conference. I looked around. There were 4 directors, including me, along with all except 1 department head from ACWD on the exact same flight. The question was, what happened if the plane crashed? Where would ACWD go? Where would our customers go? Would there be water? The district staff, I know, will run the daily business as they would. They're extremely capable, but there are decisions that needs to be made. Hence the policy, because usually where we travel, there's enough flights and flexibility for us, and there are enough cars, at least to try, and with not too much inconvenience, to make sure that at least if something bad happens, there are enough people left in senior management and on the board to keep on making decisions. So that was where it came about. I was having a wonderful time at San Jose Airport and looked up and I saw everybody. And that was a concern to me. Okay.
I think maybe the other thing too, though, I'm not enamored totally with it. It's morbid.
It's inconvenient.
But maybe we should just drop the whole automobile and aircraft part of it and just traveling, because there are other ways to travel. Being in the rail industry,
Bicycle?
quite safe by the way. However, there have been instances, recent, can't say there haven't, the East Coast, case in point. And we don't address that, and maybe we should. Although I'd say I'd be perfectly fine to have the entire board on Caltrain, I'll say that. But, you know, we get very specific here about aircraft and auto, and what our goal is to ensure that we basically keep the continuity in the event some tragic accident happens. And maybe by eliminating that, I'm not, like I said, I'm kind of with John on this. I'm not unwritten rule is fine. We just sort of just do this, and we do it for the reason of continuity. I don't know if staff needs anything written to ensure they don't travel all together with us. I don't.
I think you guys have a rule too, right?
They have a rule.
We don't have a written rule for staff, correct?
Yeah,
So, but it has been our practice.
It's a practice, and I think we may be able to just view it as a practice versus putting it in the.
We could, just offering suggestions. It could be, board members should strive not to do this, or it could be it's suggested that you don't. Or we could strike the section, or we can include trains.
Train should not be included.
It's really your call. The other issue is obviously if you have 3 directors traveling together, there's a perception potential.
Yes.
I wanted to bring that up because by omitting 14.1, you're throwing that out. This is on record. Now, this is a public record, and it may be part of a news bit that may go out and say, oh, we have no problem with traveling with 3 board members. As a board member, I am uncomfortable with 3 board members in traveling from point A to point B because of the very nature of the discussions that will go on. And I've actually passed on going to Sacramento for that very reason this last 6 months.
Okay, so I have a proposed modification. Let me know how you feel about it. We'll start with to maximum extent possible. In order to preserve the continuity of district governance, no more than 2 board members may travel together or shall travel together by aircraft, together, period. Unless, and then you keep the one traveling as part of a larger group. So that take care of the train. That give you flexibility to maximum extent possible.
President Huang, did you want to strike number 2, or was that?
No, keep number 2 in because
Okay.
that's your catch-all, just in case something unforeseen.
I can go along with that.
And with Director Weed's input, I would like to move 11.1 and what's your other section that you brought up?
No, the entire section of 11.
Yeah,
the
11.
entire
I'd
section
like
of
to move
11.
11.1 to the front of the book as guidelines and have it in a chapter by itself.
You mean back of the book?
Actually in front,
You wanna
because
move
it's
it
part
to
of
the
an
front?
introductory as a new board
Okay,
member.
okay.
I see.
It sends a message right
of
up front
conduct
with a
and
new
then
board
board
member.
rule.
This is what you have to do.
These are guidelines.
These are guidelines.
They're up front. I could deal with that.
Okay.
Are you okay with that, Director Weed? They're not rules, they're guidelines.
Yeah, this is not a good forum to do editing of a text.
Okay. I agree.
Whatever you come up with, well, I'm sure we'll have an opportunity later on to sit down and work through the numbers.
The idea is that this can be a living document, too.
That's true.
It is difficult to make revisions sometimes, especially, as you mentioned, Director Weed in the boardroom. But I think what staff is hearing is that there are specifics, and then there are sort of fuzzy, more soft guidelines, and that we should make an attempt to segregate the two and make it clear what are rules and what are guidelines, and we could strive to do that.
Well, may I suggest we insert a paragraph that just says this includes both rules and codes of conduct, and it clearly explains, I don't want to have, some member of the public coming down here and say, you did such and such, and that's a violation of your rules. And so,
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, that, we could include that in introduction and overviews.
Well, that's certainly easier than,
Separate
than
them out.
trying to
because
restructure.
they are kind of
Just
interrelated.
that we clarify, or try to express
Okay.
what this document is hoping to do. That it incorporates both, and that out of convenience, or out of readability, we try to.
We'll add it to the end of 1.8 because that's very similar, right? Not overly restrictive, establish expectations.
Yeah.
So we could just put one behind it, do a 1.9.
Well, those are rules, but then you have the expectations come in the code of conduct.
So,
So you put
so
in
we
bullet.
identify that the rules really are the rules in the code of conduct up front in section 1.3. And then we refer to everything as board rules from then on. So you can see in the definition, board rules, rules and code of conduct, hereafter board rules. And then in 1.6, we say that they're designed solely to facilitate the handling of the board of its own affairs. They are not intended and shall not be construed to create procedural substantive rights by any person. So that's not to say that you wouldn't be criticized by a member of the public or a fellow director, but we can try to wordsmith this so that it's clear that the document incorporates both specific rules and sort of more expectations for directors.
I point out that under each of those 1.3 on down, actually, 1.3 does mention code of conduct. The rest of them are board rules are intended. So it's, to the extent that we can, identify what a code, define those, the better off. Might be a sentence or two.
Okay.
So it's your issue with definitions, right? So instead of just abbreviate it to board rules, you might want to just leave it at board rules and code of conduct.
Okay. Throughout the document, there are lots. We can
I
do
know
that.
there are lots,
Okay,
but
it's no problem.
it's-
Search and replace is a function I know well.
Any other comments, Director Wee? Okay, so I just have a couple. So under section 2.4, General Manager, item 2.4.1 has a lot of bullets about what we expect you to do. I would like you to add a bullet to timely inform the board on any urgent issues related to board operations policy, somewhere along that line. I think the five of us would like to know in a timely manner if something bad is happening or something urgent or important or has high profile. So can you please add that? That is my only substantial comment. The rest of them is to request for a footnote that actually has date and version number, because the last copy you gave me got separated and I was trying to figure out was this the new version or the old version, so a footnote on every page would be appreciated. That's it.
I guess another question I might have, briefly, if someone is felt to be in violation of a rule or code of conduct, how does one, and we have no methodology for addressing that in this document, I guess, is that a conversation with the board president responsible for being the sergeant of arms?
Yeah, we because it's not clear what that future situation might be, we didn't attempt to address it holistically. So it's not in there. Certainly, a director can always inform the board president or the general manager. And then there are things that the board can do if a director is, say, violating a code of conduct. But as I understand it, it's very limited. And I will let legal counsel provide more information.
So the question that you're raising is a good one, and that is, does this board want to include a new section that talks about violations? And if you want to do that, we would need to spend some time to figure out which, because I think the board's discretion in that may change depending on which section is violated. For example, if you violate the Brown Act, that's a violation of the law as opposed to violating something else that isn't a violation of the law.
Thank you. I'm not
It's a great
suggesting we
question.
go any further at this time.
But actually, I think Director Weed brings up a very valid question that we just addressed on the last state election at the state level. So, while it's uncomfortable to talk about that, we probably should have something in place to address it in the event we have, and I don't know how to do it. I certainly am not suggesting we do it tonight, but I think we should be concerned and maybe look at what happens if a board member, let's say, is found to be, well, indicted in running guns. I'll just use an example because it's out there. It happened. What do we do? And I don't know if we could put that in a global term, or do we have to address it? But we probably should have something to address. How do we deal with if we had a member elected who suddenly becomes indicted on some charge and ends up going to prison?
Director Sethy?
Just a little bit of input here, and I say this from having attended a lot of public meetings over the years. You cannot cover hundreds and hundreds of possibilities out there. I think it's wisest if we just take up those things on an ad hoc basis. If something arises, you get your legal input from legal counsel, advice from your general manager, and you deal with that issue, whatever it might be that comes up at that time. It's the same like we have different customer issues that come up. You know, we never know what it's going to be, and then we have to address it in closed door session. So I'm averse to trying to have some enforcement section on possible violations. But I clearly understand what you're thinking.
Director Koller?
No comment.
Okay, so I actually have a suggestion that's right in the middle of the road. So I think we should add a section, however, leave it very general, that just say violation of these rules was subject to appropriate legal penalties or enforcement or something along that line. So I want to make it clear in there, basically in very high level, that if you violate the law, like the Wrong Act, you are subject to punishment as prescribed by the law. And something along the line that if you violate the rule of conduct or board rule that is not covered by legal rules or regulation, you are subject to appropriate actions by the boards as a whole. So something very, very general, just say, yes, we looked at it, we thought about it, but we're not going to go into detail.
President Huang?
Yes.
I actually believe that's still going too far right now because the board does have the right to censure another board member, for example.
We do.
If they feel that there's some egregious violation of code of conduct or the rules of the board. There are other procedures that you can go through, and you see them in parliamentary actions and, you know,
So
other governing bodies.
It probably is just a very bad wordsmithing on my part. So the attempt is not to put the details in this document, but just reference to other actions and options we have.
Yeah, they're already there.
Yes. So this would just be a reference. So at least that's the concept. But I think we have opposing opinions, so I will poll the board, see which direction they want staff to go on this issue. So I get a no on adding the section from Director Sethy. Director Koller?
No.
Okay. Director Gunther?
I'm okay as written, we don't have it.
Okay, I think you got the majority, so don't add the new section. All right, with that, I think I am done with the comments. I am going to open the floor up to our members of the public. Do you have any comments, recommendations for us on this item, Mr. Lamos?
I'm afraid to hear them. You're really bored, right?
Oh, please don't.
Like I said before, it's very interesting to hear the comments, and it's, in one way, it's good to hear, like Mr. Weed and Mr. Sethy going back and forth, and which brings me what I came up here for. On the subject of the budget, am I understanding that next year we're going to have an increase in our water bill?
Okay, can we reopen the under public comment period? So we could go back to talk about budget?
Sure.
Okay, so now we got the box checked. The answer is very likely.
So you're taking the surcharge off this year, and then after the elections, you're going to raise rates possibly?
Well, let's clarify this. I'm saying this as chair of the Finance Committee. We put a placeholder for a rate increase in the financial model, assuming the worst case demand moving forward, with only a slight increase in demand coming out of the drought. What we're experiencing right now is quite a sharp increase in demand from where we were in the wintertime. We were at about 28 million gallons a day. We've been moving up to about 45 million gallons a day right now. Assuming that we have proper revenue coming into the district, sufficient revenue, we have to make an evaluation of what the proper a proper rate increase might be. And I'll ask Finance to help me out here, but it's entirely speculative at this point, as I mentioned in the last board meeting, to talk about a 25% rate increase. But we do know we have to cover a lot of costs moving forward. We want to pay down our unfunded liabilities. And number three, we postponed a lot of projects during the drought that we are now including in our CIP projections, our capital improvement projects projections. Assuming that we were to move forward on those things, then we would likely have to have some rate increase.
Well, that's all I had.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a quick response to it also. My objections are on two levels. One, I feel that we have understated our actual obligations in our budgeting process, that we need to raise even more funds than we've shown, particularly to address legacy and additional operation and maintenance requirements beyond what our depreciation shows. And second, I'm a strong proponent for modifying our way we do our rate structure so that it is predictable and we are not subject to fluctuations in the amount of water people buy and sell, but that we match our fixed cost with fixed revenues and we match our variable cost with variable revenues. And that would make this a very boring process in a delightful way.
Thank you, Director Lee, for your comments, and we will have that discussion later. With that, I think staff received enough directions from us on this particular item. Yes? All right, then let's move on to closed sessions. So we have 3 closed session items. Item 6.1 is pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957, threat to public services or facilities, consultation with District Council and General Manager. Item 6.2 is pursuant to California Code Section 54956.9 D2. Conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure to litigation, 1 case. Item 6.3 is pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6. Conference with labor negotiators, agency designated representatives are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Rogers, and Glenn Berkheimer. Employee organization, Alameda County Water District Operators Association. Before we adjourn to the closed session, I would like to offer our members of the public if you have any comments for us on the closed session items. Seeing none, let's adjourn to closed session at 5:19, please. All right, so time is 7:02. The board is re-adjourned back from closed session. For item number 6.1, the board received report. Item 6.2, no action was taken. Item 6.3, the board conferred with negotiators and no actions were taken. With that, let's move on to item 7.1.
Thank you, President Huang. The district has been negotiating with the Alameda County Water District Operators Association and has reached what really amounts to a compilation of tentative agreements, which was ratified by the association members on June 20th, 2016. In terms of background, on October 1st, 2014, district employees in the treatment plant operator and treatment facilities operator classification series separated from the operating engineers local, union number 3, and formed their own association, the Alameda County Water District Operators Association. The district has been negotiating with the association on terms and conditions of employment and a memorandum of understanding, or an MOU, specific to the association. The parties were unsuccessful in reaching an agreement, and November 2015, mediation process began with a mediator appointed by the California State Mediation and Conciliation Service. Several mediation sessions were held. In March 2016, the association declared impasse informally to the State Mediation and Conciliation Service, but agreed to hold impasse procedures in abeyance until the mediation process has concluded. During subsequent mediation sessions, the TA, which is part of the current MOU for board consideration, was reached. The terms of the TA are consistent with the authority provided to the district's negotiators. The TA was signed by both parties on June 20, 2016, and the association ratified the TA via ratification vote on June 20th, 2016. So in terms of the TA itself, I will summarize the significant economic elements and key business terms of the MOU, which again is a compilation of several TAs. So the term is from October 1st, 2014 through June 30th, 2018. It includes a standby pay rate increased $10 to $100 per 24-hour standby shift, effective the pay period that includes January 1st, 2016. It includes a holiday pay rate. All hours actually worked on a designated holiday shall be paid at time and a half rate, unless specifically noted in the MOU. In terms of employee medical contribution, all association employees shall contribute 1.0% of base salary towards medical effective the pay period that includes July 1st, 2016. Wages. Effective the pay period that includes July 1st, 2015, all association classification pay shall be increased by 2.5%, which was made effective at that time. Effective the pay period that includes July 1st, 2016, all association classification pay shall be increased by 3.0%. Effective the pay period that includes July 1st, 2017, all association classification pay shall be increased by 3.0%. Water certification premium pay. Effective 2 pay periods following development of a T5 standby policy. Employees who possess a T5 certificate and who participate in the T5 standby pool per the noted policy shall receive a 2.5% premium. Employees who possess a T4 certificate in which the certification is above the minimum qualifications of the job classification shall receive a 1.0% premium. Employees who possess a D2 certificate in which the certification is above the minimum qualification of the job classification shall receive a 1.0% premium. These represent the key economic and business terms the terms and conditions of the approved and signed MOU will control. So the recommendation this evening is by motion, approve the memorandum of understanding between the Alameda County Water District and the Alameda County Water District Operators Association.
Thank you. Do I have any questions or comments from directors?
None from me.
None for me.
None for me.
Director Wee?
None.
Okay. So I have one. Today I received a email communication from Mr. Eric Tsai on this particular matter. I have forwarded the email to General Manager, and I will ask for this to be included as part of public comment. In his email, Mr. Tsai is requesting for more transparency from the board. I would just like to say that I definitely understand his concerns, and that today's agenda was actually in response to the public's concern and request for more transparency. I personally agree with his point of view, and I will commit myself to evaluate different options to improve transparency when we negotiate the next contract. With that, any more comments from board members? Seeing none, do I have a motion?
I move to accept staff's recommendation.
I'll second.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
Aye.
Koller,
Aye.
Sethy,
Aye.
and Huang.
Aye. With that, we have General Manager's report, please.
Yes, I have a couple of items. On July 7th, Thursday, July 7th, the Cal DSAL Executive Committee will be conducting a planning meeting, and I plan on attending that meeting. This is an important period in Cal DSAL because there is a new executive director, Mr. Paul Kelly. He's past president of Aqua, and I am on the executive committee and the board as well. Cal DSAL is the only advocacy group in California for, one, the responsible development of ocean, groundwater desal, and salinity management activities to help meet the state's water supply challenges. And as one of the few agencies in the state that actually has an operating desalination facility, it's important for the Alameda County Water District to maintain a presence in this organization. The second item is the district was recently made aware of a report that was completed by the Department of Homeland Security, and it evaluated a San Francisco earthquake study as a result of a magnitude 7.0 seismic event on the Hayward Fault. The report, rather, contained several omissions and inaccuracies. District staff was not contacted during the writing of the report, nor was East Bay Mud or SFPUC. As a result, all three agencies have submitted comments to Department of Homeland Security, and we're also sending individual letters, basically acknowledging that looking into the multiple implications on the region's infrastructure as a result of a large earthquake event is a noble task and one that we support. However, this report needs work, in our opinion, and we're encouraging the author to contact district staff so that one of the primary conclusions about the Alameda County Water District in the report, for example, is the risk of earthquake taking out the Mission San Jose water treatment plant, which was decommissioned. So the report indicates that almost 20,000 people will be out of water, and staff has not received any phone calls since decommissioning the plant that we have customers out of water as a result. So that is an example of one of the inaccuracies in the report. It also doesn't take into account the significant investments that Frankly, ACWD, East Bay Mud, and ACWD have made over the years in seismic reliability, particularly with fault offset and pipeline ruptures as a result. And the last item I have is I'm planning to take a vacation from July 15th through July 25th. In my absence, there'll be a tag team effort of Mr. Stevenson and Mr. Peterson to cover the general manager responsibilities, and I'll be sending an email to the board so that you know who's on what particular day. And that's all I have.
I'd like to make a comment on 8.2. And I studied that report sentence by sentence. It was extremely vague. The data was not there for their findings. And I was looking for real studies with background of their results. I found it a very unprofessional report, especially coming from Homeland Security. So it troubles me that this was a scare report that wanted to scare the public. As an elected official, I think it was inappropriate to put it out. Thank you.
Director Sethy?
Yes, I read through segments of the report as well, and I concur with Director Koller's comments. I also wanted to add that on the front page of today's San Francisco Chronicle, there is an article about the liquefaction zones around the Bay Area. And in fact, it points out specifically that most of Union City, from Quarry Lakes all the way north to Whipple, out to Dyer, is in a liquefaction zone. And if you look further at the maps, all of Newark is essentially in a liquefaction zone as well, and then parts of Fremont. So there was some interesting data to go through there as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or
I
questions?
cannot help but comment. I read this report, and it is a wonderful piece of fiction. It's not fiction. I mean, there's a lot of liberties taken in it. And, you know, I'm not sure the author, based on what I read, even bothered to come out here and do it. I sometimes question whether he even fully understood, or whoever the author is, fully understood the difference between the Alameda County Water District and East Bay Mud. So, interesting read, and certainly something that I think anybody on this board, since any of us have sat here, and I've sat here for a while, this district has taken incredible measures to meet the needs of the earthquake and mitigate, and none of those were in there. We have put supplies out in the field. We have sent members to, when Napa's occurred, we sent mutual aid. We've been well into the mutual aid thing. We sent people down to Hurricane Katrina, down to Liberty Water District, or Liberty Water or Liberty Municipal, I can't remember. But anyway, none of that was addressed, nor the work of the district, the money we've spent, the money East Bay Mud spent, the money, you know, it's a fine piece, it's interesting, but I hate to say it, it's a piece of fiction.
Director Wee?
Well, factually deficient and even terribly inaccurate. There is a methodology represented in the report that may become the method for which FEMA will categorize risk. And it's looking at that methodology that I would encourage us to pay attention to, and then apply our own factors if we're going to go in for grants or claims of threat for future funding.
And staff is embarking on that as well. Mr. Peterson might have a few words to share.
Yes, we're working closely with our counterparts at East Bay Mud on improving our emergency preparedness to deal with large seismic events. And with our new URSO, Jake Reed, on board, I'm excited. I'm excited that he's excited to take this on, and so there'll be more to come in the future months. We want to come back to the board and report on our progress on training and other emergency preparedness, as well as security-related topics. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the director? No? Okay, then let's move on to director's comment and/or agenda item requests. 9.1 is report from Director Sethy and we on the Water Education Foundation International Groundwater Conference in San Francisco. Who wants to go first?
John, do you want to start off?
If you wish.
All right, Director Weed.
Yes, I attended the conference. It was the past 3 days. An extraordinary amount of information, in great part because of the mechanism, the methodology by which they gave 15-minute presentations, one after another, that were concentrated, factual, and had a strong academic component. It also had an international component. I would encourage our staff with an interest in groundwater to attend this because there's an extraordinary amount of information that comes out. Some of it was state-of-the-art, such as injecting fresh water into a saline or salty groundwater basin in order to create a freshwater reservoir, freestanding, without, and the effectiveness of that, the freshwater has a tendency to float to the top, and they have data for mechanisms by which you can expand a compromised groundwater reservoir and then recover it, and use maybe a mechanism for recovery. Sigma was a major player here, and the numerous reports, discussions of the type of studies that are going to be necessary. We're very fortunate in having our groundwater basin essentially adjudicated. However, the development of the dashboards and the mechanisms for measuring the performance of the groundwater basin are new, novel, and will become standardized. And that'll be a published report to this legislature, as well as helpful to ourselves. Modeling is going to take on a much greater role, and so the models we do will be reviewed, scrutinized, and hopefully improved over time, including the potential for an operational model to show what the results are and how we can, in real time, measure the performance. Discussions on the interaction between groundwater and surface water were highlighted. And then there was a great deal on the area of nitrates, which I think Director Sethy took a particular interest in non-point pollution, and I'll let him carry on.
Well, with that segue, yes, I did attend quite a series of presentations on non-point source pollution, which amounts to manure in farming and dairies. And I will say it was very interesting. I attended the first 2 days of the conference, and it was, in my opinion, just an extraordinary conference. There were 225 people there from virtually every continent, and we heard the most professional presentations. As Director Weed pointed out, they were about 15 minutes each with 5 minutes for question and answer. Because I've already been through quite a few presentations on Sigma, I decided to use this occasion to learn about things I did not know much about. So I attended a number of sessions on nitrate policy. And by the way, I'm going to keep this short. I plan to bring this up in the Water Resources Committee meeting, if I may, because it doesn't serve to talk about each one of these sessions right here. I did attend a number of the presentations on managed aquifer recharge, which I found really interesting. Another set of presentations on groundwater management modeling and data. Once again, that was very interesting. Director Weed and I attended one presentation about It was from the Netherlands. Water, it was about brackish water as a resource for solving agricultural and industrial freshwater needs. I had a really nice discussion with that professor during one of the breaks about our brackish water desal plant and what his experience was in the desal industry in terms of offering desalinated water for industrial applications and for the pharmaceutical industry, for biotech, for the semiconductor industry. There are some real interesting opportunities that we may wish to take a look at down the road where we can charge a premium for a small quantity of our desalinated water. I also attended a couple of sessions on best management practices for water supply, another on looking at the economics of long-term groundwater, a case study of the Tulare Lake in California. And lastly, there were a couple of very good presentations on groundwater management in Mexico and Australia. And the one on Australia emphasized the millennial drought that they went through and what were the experiences learned, what were the negatives that they went through. It was a case study really of what if we go through something like this, what would we do in terms of managing our water resources, trading markets for water, whether it was groundwater or surface water. So all in all, I would say this is one of the very best and most educational conferences I've been to. And just like Director Weed mentioned, I would encourage in the future, if we have an opportunity to have staff not only participate on the learning side, but perhaps even be a contributor on the presentation side. So that's my report.
Thank you. All right, so now that we're done with item 9.1, we're back to the General Director's comment, report, agenda item requests. Does any directors have other agenda item requests, comments?
Not for me.
Done.
No. Director Gunther? Director Wee?
No.
Okay.
I've done enough today.
So I do have one item. I believe the district will be represented at the annual 4th of July parade, and I personally plan to attend. Do I have any other directors? Director Koller, Director Sethy, Director Wee, Director Gunther?
I believe I'm working that morning.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh.
Sorry.
And 4 of us in the vehicle is okay.
Actually, we're going to walk.
We actually have 2 vehicles, so we can accommodate that just fine.
You want to ride, or usually we walk, I believe, in the back or the front of the vehicles.
Make sure you wear a wide-brimmed hat.
You'll probably be
so,
safer than me.
just as a reminder, we're supposed to meet at the staging area at 9 a.m.
All right, with that, I think that is the end of today's agenda. So it is 7:25. I will say the meeting is adjourned.